Paperform. I'm Benja. I'm a paper engineer and I've been doing this for about 10 years now. Anything and everything out of paper is what I do, as you'll see. I've got like 10,000 slides, so if it goes really long, I'll speed up, and if it's going slow, but it should be all right. Because I like to keep these things informal, and rather than reading from a script, it just makes me kind of enjoy it more. Just quickly, this is one of the first things I ever made in paper, which was a, I'll just move that little mouse over there. It's just a little sculpture of me if I was Victorian, which I made back in 2004, I think. Look, I mean, I wanted to start here. I'm just reading this book at the moment called Where Song Began by Tim Lowe. Tim Lowe, he's a ethnobiologist, geologist, and he's an ornithologist as well. He knows a lot about birds. And it's this really fascinating book, which is the latest in scientific discovery, and it's about Australian birds, which is kind of proving that it's always been thought that Australian birds, songbirds around the world had originated in the Northern Hemisphere and had kind of spread their way across down into Australia. But actually the latest scientific research is showing us that songbirds emanated here in Australia, which I thought was really kind of fascinating, all the songbirds of the world. So this is a really good book if you want to read something about birds in Australia. And it was just while I was reading that at the beginning of this book that I kind of came across this bit of information which I found very fascinating. It was pertinent to me. The Tasmanian Blue Gum, which is, is endemic, is that the right word? Endemic to, I don't know if that's the right word, to Tasmania. And I mean, the map's kind of small, but you can kind of see its region over here in the bottom right-hand corner. Was actually planted extensively around the world in the 19th century because at that time, doctors kind of thought that the fumes that the gums gave off was actually kind of good for people's well-being. But actually what happened in the 1920s was, and so as a consequence, it was planted extensively around the world. It's because it's a very drought-resistant tree, it really took off, and so it was planted across South America, California, the Indian subcontinent, through China, etc. And in the 1920s, when we actually worked out how to, professionally produce paper in a modern sense, rather than like rags and stuff like that, it actually turned out that the Tasmanian Blue Gum is the best tree in the world to produce the kind of fibres that we need for our paper. So it's kind of become this tiny little tree from that tiny little part of the world has become this kind of like global superstar in terms of paper. And so it's got amazing fibres, it can be bleached really white, so it's nice and white. And also it's kind of really strong, but it's also flexible, so it's good for A4 photocopy paper, but it's also good for toilet paper and stuff like that. So I thought that was really interesting as an idea, and it kind of set me off this path of, I was with my friend up in Byron Bay talking, he lives up there and he's very much into ecology and the ecosystem and stuff, and we kind of started to talk about the idea of a strong and varied ecosystem, and that kind of, I thought, kind of pertained nicely to design. Anyway, so initially I was going to talk about a whole bunch of other people, but I just ended up kind of focusing on my stuff. But so look, I'm just going to go through, and I've got a few different themes, and I guess diversity is the overarching idea of what I want to talk about. So just as a link in, I thought I'd start off with paper flowers. 2015 was the year of paper flower. I don't know why. I think I maybe did like 20 different projects of the paper flowers. And I mean, this idea of diversity, it's really interesting. Whenever someone come and emails us and said, oh, can you make us some more paper flowers? My assistant kind of groans, not again. But I think I like this idea of like, when you focus on one thing, how much can you, push it, and if you've got to do another flower, how do you make it different from the last? So I just thought I'd show you initially some of the range of paper flowers we made in 2015. So this is a window I did for Jenny Key. She's a knitwear designer. And this is down in Melbourne at Pieces of 8 with Mel Katzalita. She's I'll just check the time. She is she runs Pieces of 8, which is an amazing jewellery gallery in Melbourne. And her father's an architect, and he designed this window. And so we kind of put these big kind of paper flowers. They're Australian natives. We've got wattle and waratahs, etc. And Jenny's kind of iconic glasses. But this is a really fun project. She's amazing, Jenny. But yeah, I mean, this architecture is so incredible, and it's all metal, it's steel, so we kind of like magnetised all the flowers to the metal. Another flower I did was for Carla Zampatti. She is celebrating her 50 years in fashion, which is kind of mega when you think about it. And this is something I did with Harper's Bazaar, with just like a little orchid I made her as a prop. And Luke and Anna from Romance Was Born, who they'll come up lots, but they're my good mates, and they styled that shoot. Here's some kind of flowers I made for Coogee Pavilion, which were kind of based on the idea of like more technical models of paper. Of flowers. What else have we got? This is a collaboration I did with Luke and Anna for their latest fashion show last year at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, which was, I kind of worked on that little kind of sign up the top there. And Alice Babbage did the set design for this, but it was quite beautiful. Alice McCall, she's a fashion designer here in Australia, and we did her windows. We made these kind of like iris lily, kind of Art Deco-y kind of things. And recently I did the Elle Style Awards, which was this kind of photo booth. And I mean, this was a real challenge because we really had to like produce a whole range of different flowers with a whole range of different techniques. And we kind of set it up in the hot sun that day. And then at that night, everyone kind of like lined up and got their photo taken. Flowers everywhere. This is like some tiny little flowers we made for Lucy Figgins from the Design File. She was doing this charity project, a kind of doll's house charity project, and she asked us to make these little kind of plants. So my assistant loves making these tiny little things, so I kind of set him to this and he got really into it. We did a job in Tokyo at the end of last year, and we kind of had all these sakura mass produced, which was this kind of giant job, almost killed us. And then we kind of installed it in this kind of big event, and everything here is paper. So just another kind of set of more flowers. This is a job I just recently did for Akoya, which is a candle brand. More flowers. These are lotus flowers this time. Kind of beautiful white on white, which is a bit of a thing in paper. I'll talk about that later. And these are some more flowers I just made for Chinese New Year for Westfield. So there's all the flowers I made in 2015. Out of the way. Okay, so the next bit is technique. So this is probably this is really the first project I ever did, and I just kind of thought I'd come back here and start. I studied graphic design at TAFE, and I did 3 years. I'd got an advanced diploma or what have you, but during that time we had a class in paper construction, it was called. So it was a very basic, rudimentary class. And at that time, which was in 2003, I think, paper and the whole idea of tangible design was just kind of coming up on the world's design radar. And I just guess I happened to be in the right place at the right time. The internet was around. And I just kind of stumbled upon this thing called paper engineering, which I didn't even know was a thing until I kind of started Googling what the people who make pop-up books call themselves. So paper engineer it is. And so this was just a small project. And I mean, this first pop-up I made, it took me about 2.5, 3 weeks to kind of like work out in my mind how it would actually function. And I just woke up one morning and had a eureka moment. I was like, there it is. So that, I guess, put me on the path to paper engineering. And once I left TAFE, it's quite challenging because, you know, no one's really said you can be a paper engineer. It wasn't at that time, at least, anyway, a kind of so much on the radar. So it was kind of like, well, where do I go? How do I do this, make this my job? So I'm kind of set out by creating projects for myself and kind of putting them in art shows, etc., and just trying to keep my hand in. So this is a series of pop-up books I made for an art show, Small Spider. And pop-ups is really where I started. It's kind of my first love, and I think it's just the technical aspect of how the paper folds, and it's quite magical, and we'll get to more of that later. But then pretty quickly, after those pop-ups, I kind of started to think about, well, what else can we do with paper and how else can we apply it? So I started to work with paper sculpture. This is a friend of mine, Megan Morton. She's a stylist. And I mean, friends are not to be underestimated in this world. I think, you know, I've done so much collaboration throughout my career, and I wouldn't really be where I am without my friends and all the help that and advice and encouragement that they've given me. So this was kind of really the first time that my work was in print. And it was very exciting. But I mean, white on white in paper is really something that works very well. I always try and follow that idea, less is more in Japanese, that Japanese tenet of design, less is more. It always works out, especially in paper. But that's what's wonderful about paper. It can be complex, it can be simple, you know, it's so varied and broad, which you'll hopefully see. This is another technique I applied quite early on, which was kind of a woven paper cover, which I worked with Greg Anderson from Trigger on, and we did this for Shigeru Ban, who's a Japanese architect, and he was proposing to build a building here in Sydney, which Frank Gehry won the pitch. But this was kind of the suite that we put together for him. I mean, repetition's a real thing in design and especially in paper. So this was something we did for Penguin, which was their Christmas campaign a few years ago. And we kind of, Gatsby was just out, and so it was Art Deco was the theme, Great Gatsby. And so we kind of made these series of stages for the books to kind of sit on, I guess, as kind of like a backdrop. And you know, they're just beautiful in there. They're very regimented, as Art Deco design usually is. And I don't know, they really appeal to me. I love that kind of Art Nouveau, Art Deco, all that kind of design stuff. Colour's a thing too, obviously. I can't get enough of colour. And you know, it's not something even that I thought about when I started, but it's something that I've grown to love with a passion. It's me every day is colour, and it just makes me happy. I don't own any black clothes. Not that a lot of my friends wear only black, but I'm like the opposite. What else? And I mean, even just really simple techniques. That's what's so great about paper. You know, we're given it as a kids. It's the first thing we're really handed. You know, when we're young. And you know, even just like strips of paper, you know, en masse can render a beautiful result. This is a mask I made for an exhibition which is held at He Made, She Made up on Oxford Street. Just a mask, you know, one day that I made, which is great. Origami techniques. Now, I did a lot of origami when I was young. We had a lot of Japanese exchange students that lived with us, which was fantastic. But this is a job I did for David Jones recently. Maybe last year, I can't remember now. I've done so many projects now, they all kind of blur into one. But kind of like large-scale origami. So this is kind of a series of kind of animals that we made for the kids to be shot with. Here I am. But I mean, underneath is like an armature of foam core, etc. And then over the top, we've kind of created these like big folds. So it's not just one bit of paper or anything, but kind of to give the illusion. More about technique. I mean, a lot of what we do is by hand, and I really love that aspect of hand crafting something. It's a slow process, so you have time to think about things and you can really assess and appraise as you go. But more and more lately, because the jobs we're doing are getting bigger and bigger, we're kind of getting things produced. So this is basically a knife line. What I do is I use Illustrator, a vector, because it just gives millimetre precision, which is what we need as paper engineers to do things like pop-up books, etc. I brought a knife for you to see. I just did a job the other day around the corner, which I'll talk about later, but this is what a knife looks like. And so these vector lines, we've got like kind of cut and fold, and these are kind of made by my knife guy, and you can kind of see the precision they kind of route out this shape that we design. Then another machine like prints out the metal, and they kind of hammer it in with copper chisels so it doesn't dent the metal, and then they kind of put on this foam on the other side, so it goes into the press, and the paper comes out and it punches down, and then you kind of end up with this thing here, which I'll put back. But I've got one folded over there. But this project comes up in a second, so I'll show you what it does. But I mean, that's kind of more and more we're doing that kind of production thing because, you know, we're doing these bigger projects and it's just getting too labour intensive to sit around for days hand cutting things out. My poor old hands. This was really the first time I'd ever done anything in terms of pop-up book production. I mean, I'd handmade pop-up books before, but this was kind of really the first time we'd actually had it produced. I did a pop-up book for Kylie, and I kind of paid for myself to go to China because I thought it was really important to see how these things get made, to know the back end of it, because, you know, it's just kind of learning. So we went and went to the factory, and I mean, all pop-up books are made by hand. I don't know if you know that. So, I mean, when you think about they're $40 each or whatever, it's kind of incredible when you think how much labour goes into it. And these people who were working in these factories were incredible. They were just some of the most talented people I've ever met, and just kind of hand folding there for hours. I mean, I could do it myself. I love it. It's just really, you know, slow, but it's very labour intensive. We do manual labour. That's basically what we do. But this is the finished pop-up book, which, one of the spreads in the pop-up, which is kind of a lotus, and it was kind of held Kylie's CD in the middle. And my assistant, there's Kylie, she's cute. I had to put her in, she's like that again. I mean, leading on from this idea of technique, in about 2013, I'd kind of got to the point where I thought I'd done most of the things I could do with paper, and I decided at that point to kind of refocus my technique on just paper itself, because I needed to find a new challenge in what I've been doing because I was getting a bit bored. So I decided to create a series of artworks based on the Platonic solids, which is like kind of the base geometries. And then out of it came this kind of body of work called New Platonic, which was a series of kind of interlocking shapes that kind of wove together to form these kind of geometric paper tapestries. And then I kind of boxed them up in perspex and they were sold them as fine art. But it's funny, art and design, and yeah. The art world doesn't really like me because I don't know, I was actually listening to Ken Doan the other day. It's a completely different story, but he was saying how he hasn't been picked up by the art world. And anyway, art and design, it's a funny old place, that one. We could talk about that later. But anyway, so New Platonic, this is the series I made. And so this is just one of the elements that got printed out. And then this is on my desk, kind of weaving these shapes together. But they're beautiful. I mean, I didn't sell all of them. I've got a lot of them in my house still. And I really love them. I really love them. So from that sense of only using paper, it completely actually reinvigorated my whole design practice. And it just showed me that even when you think you've done everything, it's like beyond mountains, more mountains, you know what I mean? There's always something, especially when you focus on one particular thing, you've always got to keep on pushing to keep it interesting for yourself. So this kind of interlocking paper thing has now become a bit of a stream, and I try and bring it into every project where it's pertinent. This is a series of hats I made for Hermes in Germany for their summer party in 2015, I think. Can't remember. Anyway, and basically they folded together without any glue. So it was on the night the guests would arrive at this kind of fantastical ball in the chateau, and all the guests would be given these kind of like folding paper hats. And yeah, I mean, I worked really, really hard on these. I kind of regard these as some of my masterpieces, really. They're quite beautiful. And no glue, which is good. This is another project I just did the other day actually for Nike, which was the Air Max Day, and they had it in the Paramount building around the corner. And that's what this shape is. It's kind of one of these kind of corner elements here. But I mean, that's another thing about paper which is so exciting about is it's so versatile, but it's also really light. So when it comes to applying it in terms of installation, and it's a really popular thing for people to use with windows, and you can kind of get in there and kind of make something kind of amazing relatively quickly. It took us about 3 days to hang this, and it was kind of based on the Pompidou Centre and the pipes there, etc., and Air, you know, like Nike Air Max. So it was a great job. I mean, heaps of fishing line there. It was just up and down the ladder. Okay, so the next one is materials. This is the job I did for QVB, and one of the interesting things is even though when you focus on something like paper, you know, it has applications across. You know, the techniques we use have applications across so many different areas, and especially when you start working with different materials. So this was a job I did for spring, I think maybe back in 2012, and basically giant flowers, which is kind of, you know, the base is paper engineering, but because it was so big and it had to hang, we had to kind of move into this kind of like boardy stuff. So interestingly enough, it still kind of looks a bit like paper. The colours are a bit, but you know. More QVB. And even like the properties of paper, like translucent paper, which is really exciting. This is a series of lanterns that we made for Cliff Dive, which is a bar up the road. I'm not sure if it's still going or not, but I think Jeremy and Alex own Tio's as well across the road. So this is kind of like a job for mates. But we made all these lanterns. Like when my assistant first started, I kind of gave this job to him, and he kind of spent like months making all these cool paper lanterns. I love them, they're beautiful. We didn't get the best photos of that. But another job we did for Lego. So this is kind of another aspect. For Lego for their 50th birthday, they asked a bunch of Australian creatives to interpret Lego. And pretty much everyone did just an image, you know. But for me, because my work is so much about 3D, I kind of wanted to use that element of the Lego, which I kind of grew up playing with as a kid, and kind of create this 3D-ness with the Lego. So we had this Lego guru who's like this certified Lego guy come and kind of make. Yeah, it's true. He's an Australian guy, and he's Ryan. Can't remember his last name. And he built this design for me. Like he built my design, and so we kind of dug out and I initially didn't have lights inside, but he suggested that we put lights inside, and it coincided with Vivid, so it was kind of glowing at night. It looked really cool. Yeah, and that's in my studio. It weighs a ton. Here's another thing I did with Hermes. I was invited to go to Paris to work with Petit Dash, which is a small kind of offshoot of Big Hermes, where they kind of recycle all the leftover materials, anything they can't really sell, slightly damaged. And so we created a pop-up book in leather. And obviously it's the same properties, similar folding stuff. So we kind of made this this kind of 4-page book based on the corners of Hermes luggage, which are kind of iconic in terms of their design pantheon. And we made these beautiful leather books. I mean, the work there is they're a phenomenal company, and the archives, and it's just incredible, really. Another job I've done recently for a friend of mine is I've done kind of getting into a bit of set design as well, which is kind of interesting. And for this particular project, my friend Victoria Chu is a choreographer, and she put together a dance piece called Do You Speak Chinese, which is about her Chinese heritage and as an Australian person, etc. But she had some really specific requirements, and so for this particular project we used Tyvek, which is a building material. I don't know if you guys know that stuff, but it's just kind of, it acts like paper, but it's kind of very, it's almost impossible to tear, basically, and they kind of use it to clad buildings as a kind of impervious membrane. But it was just really interesting in this particular project to get to use something like Tyvek. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to cut, but we did all right. And these kind of screens kind of rolled down during the performance, and I made this kind of this big head, this dragon head for her. This is a collaboration I did with my friend Henry Wilson, who spoke here last month. Maybe some of you came to see Henry. He's a good friend of mine, and he and I and another paper guru, Bianca Chang, kind of did this trio of collaboration where Henry, who's a industrial designer and product designer, created these kind of brass cones. And then kind of set Bianca off on our course and said, we'll create a lampshade to go with this. So this is kind of my folding lampshade that I made. No glue, once again. And it was shown in Milan, and actually just got invited back to show the Milan Triennale. So it's up now in Italy somewhere, which is very exciting. And it's, yeah, beautiful. I love the marriage of like something like really kind of supple and soft like paper, and then something really hard and strong like, bronze. It's beautiful. I think it's brass or bronze, I don't know, I can't remember. But I've got one in my house hanging out, that's good. Okay, so where are we now? Scale. Scale's a really big thing in paper, paper design. When I first started, a lot of what I did was really tiny and small. And I think when we think about paper, it's one of those things that, when you do a pop-up book or you make something really tiny, it always really draws people in. It's kind of quite magnetic, and there's some magic about paper. I don't know what it is, but people are just really drawn into it. And so when you start to create things like on a mini scale, people are like, wow, what is that? So this is a series I did for Topshop. Before they actually had their big shop here, they had like a little capsule store in Inku in Paddington. And it was based around the best of British. So we did the crown jewels and high tea. And I mean, round things are really hard to make in paper. So I think that sphere, that all took me like 4 days to make or something. But anyway, I try and steer clear of round things, but yeah. And I'm just going to go through a couple of my early works that were kind of quite small, and then we'll kind of transfer. So this is something I did for Park Life, which is a bit of festival branding. I mean, colour here, you can see, strong, pure colour really works well in paper. It's beautiful. Paper type is also a bit of a nightmare. I try and steer clear of that. It's just incredibly detailed and time-consuming. The Opera House, Open Day, we did a poster for them. Which was great. I mean, if you tell me, I'm from Sydney, so if you told me I was going to do something for the Opera House one day, I would have never believed you, but they're great clients. These are really old works now. These are back from these are like 6 years ago or something. Another amazing thing about paper is, with this scale idea is how it can be scaled up and down relatively easily, and it still functions in the same way, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. But this is a really small pop-up that I made for Luke and Anna from Romance Again. And so I made a tiny little maquette, was about, yay big, and it kind of worked, etc. And then I kind of handed it over, and they produced this giant set, which was like 4 meters by 3 meters, and kind of lowered down, and the models all strutted past. And so yeah, I mean, that's what's amazing about paper. You can scale it up and down, and the functionality still works in the same kind of way. I mean, fashion's a tough game. I don't know why people are so desperate to get into fashion. It's like you work so hard, it's over in 6 minutes, and then you're on to the next one. It's just like, it's crazy. It's really tough. More mini stuff, but this is something more recent. This is a series of miniature sets that we did for Bell magazine, and in collaboration with Warwick Fabrics. And it's just this, I mean, we just kind of went bonkers and made all this tiny MIDI stuff, and it's basically 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, so it's just like a transgression, that's not quite the right word, just kind of moving through the decades. I like the 90s one the best, I think. It's like the Friends set. This is something I did for charity, and it's basically a big mountain, and Sark Studios is a fashion company on Crown Street. And the lady who runs it, she's really passionate about the environment and climate. And it was when the Climate Council got canned by the government, she decided to kind of create this fundraising night. So she asked a lot of different artists to create a series of artworks, which it actually had to include like one of her shirts, so you can kind of see it's here at the front. But I kind of made this giant mountain, which was, it was actually quite large. It was maybe 2 meters wide, but I just love that, how you can take a photo of it and it kind of looks like it's this huge thing, even though it's not. I suppose this is an artwork I did in installation at Gaffer Gallery years ago, and I suppose this is really kind of like the first time I did something that was quite big and immersive in terms of like being in a space that was filled with paper. I just kind of made a paper cabin or whatever. I had like a week to do whatever I wanted in there, and then we had it open so people could kind of walk through. That's Iris, who's the curator, and her boyfriend had us jumping, which was kind of fun. This is another job I've done with Luke and Anna from Romance again, and this was for a fashion show they had for the Virgin Melbourne Fashion Festival, I think, at the NGV, National Gallery Victoria, in the epic, I can't think of what the name of it is, but it's got this huge kind of stained glass skylight, which is just so incredible. And I think the idea here is, this scale of, it's kind of quite a detailed piece. So we kind of made these kind of like Australian foliage, pardon me, and then we just had it punched out like 20,000 times and like added it en masse along the runway. Luckily I had helpers for this because it was such a huge job, but it came up beautifully. And Luke and Anna, they're mega, but they got access to these incredible old, the inspiration was May Gibbs, and so they got access to these amazing old ballet costumes that had come out of the archives based on Snugglepot and Cuddlepie, the ballet, and then so they just kind of chucked the models down the runway, and it just looked beautiful. It was quite an amazing night. This is probably one of my more recent jobs. This was for the Sydney Festival for Kieran at the Spiegel Tent Bar, and Kieran asked us to kind of create this moment, I guess, a hanging moment. And so this thing is like 9 meters long. It's this giant kirin. It's like a cloud or a kirin. I guess a kirin is a mythical Japanese creature. It's not a dragon, it's a kirin, which is a completely separate thing. It's not a fish either, but anyway. But yeah, I mean, this was such a fantastic job. And I mean, here is, these scales all interlock without any glue again. So this is kind of, it's still coming back into my work. And, we had to do like a big kind of broad gesture, but then also there's these kind of moments of sakura and wheat, etc. And, kind of just trying to tell the story of Kirin on a more subtle level. But I don't know if you guys remember those 4 days in January where it just poured with rain. Do you remember it was just like pouring and pouring and pouring? Those were the days when we installed it. The roof was leaking, and it was just like, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The knife was wrong, it got punched out wrong, but it was Christmas, so we couldn't do anything about it. So we had to hand stick everything back together, 4,000 of these things, and then we set it up, and then some workman with his ladder kind of went, and then it was like ripped it all. Anyway, it was the worst. But sometimes things go wrong, and it's okay. It's all right. You get through it, and you're just like, it's fine, it's fine. So, whatever. We had a beer, we had a Kirin at the end. But no, it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful. It's really hard you have a vision and then you think, can I do it? You don't know if you can actually do it until you get there on the ground. Then you start to do it, and it's quite hard to keep something like that in control because it's so big. It's just, you're gonna kind of like, yeah, it was a real challenge, this job, but very rewarding. This is another job that's actually hanging up in the galleries at the moment. It was for Chinese New Year. And I put this in because, it kind of shows like even something that's quite small. We had made like 2,500 of these little pinwheels, which was kind of fun because you just sit down with a beer and watch Game of Thrones or something and just kind of make them, and then we had these kind of metal frames made, which ended up costing like, more than half the budget, which is crazy. But I'm I'm still learning even after all this time. There's still pitfalls everywhere. You've got to be careful. But I mean, it turned out beautifully. And just like, I love that kind of idea of like a small little detail then repeated like 10,000, all this time can like add up to be something that's really quite beautiful. And then the wind comes through and, it's like a design challenge. You've got to solve it. How do you make it so that even with the lightest breeze, it'll spin? And yeah, it was really, really great project. This is actually something that launched last night. My friend Kylie, she is an incredibly talented business lady, but she started this new thing called The House, which is about design of funerals, which is really fascinating. You'd never kind of get there, but she got there. So we've created this kind of large-scale interlocking kind of element that we can kind of put together to form this paper chapel. So, I mean, you can see this guy here for scale. So it's up there. And we launched in Carriage Works last night. So it was another example of, you don't quite know if it's going to work until you get there, but it worked, which is good. It's beautiful. And then the lighting inside. And yeah, I like that idea of a paper chapel. It's kind of quite a soft idea. What else? Clients. Okay. I mean, I've worked for a whole range of people, as you know and see, but you'll see more. But I mean, I think it's really important to do your own work as well. I try and do as much of my own creativity as I can, above and beyond the constraints of a commercial brief, So these are something I did early on, some flamingos and some typography. And this was my first solo show I did at Object Gallery back in 2010, I think, called The Paper Attic. And it was basically a chance for me to make anything and everything out of paper that I'd always wanted to make but never had the chance. So it was exciting. And this is something I just did for China Heights just in December, which is just like a tiny little mask, which I love these little things and like making little models. And I've got so much stuff in my studio, which is coincidentally just across the road, actually. I'm a local. But, so not only do I love working for smaller clients as well, more boutique-y stuff. This is a job we did in Double Bay, which is a florist, and so I think it's cool to kind of work with, smaller people as well as bigger people, I guess is the way I'm trying to say that. This is really the first job I did for the Hermes, which is we made, 7 pairs of these kind of amazing wings. And this was back in 2010 for Christmas. And I guess this was really the first job. It was like 35 days straight of like cutting feathers and folding them, and I was crying by the end. But it kind of really taught me what it takes to be the best, and that's basically where I've always wanted to go, is like to the top. And it's kind of always been my driving motivation. And so, because you only get one chance to do something for a company like this, and this project has opened up so many different doors. And I just think, if you've got the chance, you've got to go for it, So that's kind of what I learned in this particular circumstance. Beautiful. Sia, more collaboration. My friend Tasha Noble is an incredible artist and creative. And we worked together to make this something for Sia, So what I'm trying to express in this section, I guess, is like just the diverse range of places that paper can be applied, in different ways and with different people. So we did this for Sia's album cover, We Are Born, before she was like huge. And I've also worked with Cat Power. I love Cat Power. She's so great. So we kind of made this I worked with Catherine Brickman, who now works at Triple J, but she used to run Greedy Hand, this little collective. And we worked together and made this kind of like destroyed New York skyline. And then we kind of flew the camera around through the skyline, and then we projected it behind Cat Power on a world tour, and she was groovy. We didn't get to meet her though. Lots of editorial work. I love editorial work. This is something I did for Good Weekend, and it's just beautiful. Once again, just shows like simple is best with paper. If you just kind of keep the colours really tight and just don't do something too out there, you end up with something that's really, really, really beautiful. This is something I did with Tasha again for Mardi Gras. So I think it's really, interesting to do like community work as well. And so doing something for the LGBT community, it was really interesting. Like they had no money and no time, and then everyone was like, we hate it. But, it was like, we don't have any money. But no, and everyone's got a really, because there's so many different, everyone's got an opinion in those kind of communities. So it was very interesting how they all really, it was kind of created a real reaction, that one. And we try and do charity every year as well. Some here and there, bits of charity. This is something I did for the Breast Cancer Foundation. The statistic is 1 in 6 women won't survive. So we did 6 portraits. yeah, it was just a beautiful job, and really special to be able to do something like that. Yeah, it was just really very, very, very special, I guess. RJ Wiggins is an international paper company. I think they're based in France, and they asked me to. They kind of released this new paper called Second Skin, and they asked 8 paper engineers or paper creatives, I guess, from around the world to submit a mask for this mask competition that they had. And so this is what I created using this particular special type of paper, which kind of features in the front. And I mean, one of the things I love most about what I do is like kind of creating imagery, creating images. And this for me is probably one of my most favorite things I've done. Something about the color, the way it is. The moment I had it, I could see it in my mind. It just kind of ended up working out of treat. And my friend Bowen Arico, who's a photographer, shot this. Turned out beautifully. And then actually, I mean, that's the thing, I try and say yes to everything. It's not possible, but because you never know where it's going to lead, you know what I mean? So in 2013, I was invited to go to Korea to show my work as part of the World Pop-Up exhibition, alongside lots of other paper engineers. And this is Kyung-gi, who's the curator of the show. And they actually ended up using that image as their kind of main image. So it was all around Seoul and on buses and billboards, and it was I was like, whoa, it's pretty cool. Yeah, Seoul's really such a great city. You should get there if you can. Something I did for David Jones, which is just a beautiful wreath, but retail. The old corporate Maccas. It's in college, everyone's always like, oh, will we work for corporate? And then when they come, they're like, yes, let's do it. But this is like a series of puppets we made, which is really challenging to kind of like do moving paper and stuff like that. This is another recent job. These next 3 are like pop-up books actually I've done for big companies, which is really fascinating. And this is for PricewaterhouseCoopers, the big accounting firm, and this is basically like a tool that they now use for CEOs. So it's really interesting that they're kind of trying to make the boardroom more playful, I guess. And so pop-up is a way to interact, and kind of how do you gather this information or share information with these high-powered guys or ladies, I should say. These high-powered people who, it's numbers and business all the time, and so kind of bring a bit of playfulness into the boardroom. This is a pop-up book we did for Google. Which is, I mean, really cool that a digital company like that would come to someone like me to, create something that's analog, and kind of try and sell their business products through a really analog way. I just love that. It's got such a different kind of way to kind of approach it. And they had a really tight brief, so, this is pretty tight. They kind of knew exactly what they wanted, really. But once again, all white on white, it's really beautiful with these lovely illustrations, which I didn't do, but worked out really nicely. And this is a pop-up book I did for Samsung in 2013, as it says. And it basically was to launch the new Galaxy S3 or something, the North American campaign. And they came to us, and we had like 12 days to do this thing, so it was pretty gnarly. It was kind of my best friend, who's an art director and creative director, he art directed it for me, and we just kind of like worked for 12 days non-stop and all night. But then it ended up, it was like the North American campaign, and it ended up being screened in Times Square, which is, I mean, bonkers really, on the Samsung screen. So that was definitely a career highlight. And sorry, I should also add that New York, then there was Milan, and then there was Amsterdam and London. So there were 4 other paper engineers who were asked to kind of create pop-up books for those specific cities as well. So it wasn't just me. It was a whole campaign across the world. This is a Telstra bag. Packaging is something I love, but I haven't done that much of it. I've done a little bit, but I recently did this Spectrum bag for Telstra. So packaging is a whole other world, which I could kind of like to do more of. Yeah, we made this Spectrum bag, which got launched a year and a half ago, maybe. I don't know if it's still in production. I don't think it probably is, but it was just kind of like a bit of a cherry on top for this whole kind of branding campaign that they'd done. I suppose we're kind of like into the end of the speech now, but I just kind of wanted to quickly touch on ideas and where they come from. One of my obsessions is Antiques Roadshow. I love Antiques Roadshow. I'm obsessed. I think I've seen every one of them twice. But this is a job I did for Adidas and Pharrell, and they launched this kind of, the super color sneaker or whatever it is. And so they asked us to kind of create something with the shoe. And so this lobster kind of came out of nowhere really, but I was watching Antiques Roadshow and there was kind of like a in-row, which is a Japanese lacquer box that you'd wear at the belt back in the day, and it kind of had these like beautiful like layers, but on the box was actually a lobster, which I thought was really cool. You know, the Japanese are so interesting in the way that they approach design, and in that I kind of saw this kind of like Adidas trio stripe and it just kind of clicked off. Anyway, so I really wanted the pink shoe, of course, and but they didn't give me the pink shoe, they gave me the blue shoe. So anyway, I was a bit bummed out, so I started to like Google blue lobsters. And it turns out that actually genetically 1 in 2 million lobsters are blue. So it's a thing, a blue lobster actually exists. And I just kind of love that idea, how you can kind of stumble on something and you never know where an idea will come from, and that kind of sense of, it's a little bit zany. It's almost like a jewel box or a kind of casket for the shoe, I guess is the way I kind of see it. This is another job I did for Little National, which is a hotel down in Canberra. And this has only just happened late last year. But the Little National is built on this bit of land where there's this golden sun moth, which is an endangered moth. And it's only about like that big. But as a consequence, they found this moth on this land, so they couldn't build the hotel where they wanted to. So they had to kind of like build it off to the side. So it kind of created this really difficult space for them to build in. But as a consequence, they commissioned me to make a series of artworks for the interior of the hotel. And so we kind of used this idea of the moth as our base, and we just kind of like launched off into Moth Town, I guess. And just did a whole range of like variations of moth. And so we kind of did these kind of cool geometric volumes with, you know, thousands of moths kind of stuck on. And then also we kind of created the life cycle of the moth in like 3D paper. And my other assistant is this amazing Korean girl, and she like loves the tiny detail, and she got really into it. She was really into it. And then we kind of like put it into beautiful kind of Perspex cases and Perspex stands, and I love Perspex and clear things as one of my obsessions too. So that was quite exciting to be able to incorporate that. And this big chrysalis, and yeah, it was a really beautiful, beautiful job. Beautiful hotel. My favourite city in the world is Tokyo. I love it there, and I find it such an inspirational place. I've been studying Japanese. Oh, well, actually, I should save that for the next slide. But what I love about Tokyo, and just in general, the city, I mean, obviously, a lot of what I've done is natural, and, you know, nature lends itself to paper engineering, you know, flowers and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I really love the texture of the urban environment, and I find that a really great source of inspiration. And I always try and kind of keep my eyes open. I do a lot of like speeches for design students, etc. And that's one of the things I always tell them is, you know, you've got to keep on looking and always keep your eyes open, because you never know where a design solution will appear. And it's usually in the most inconspicuous of places. And, you know, Tokyo for me is just like the ultimate. It's so graphic and geometric and zany and quirky. It's such a great city. Here we go, language. I mean, I think ideas as well, carrying on from that, for me it's really important. Obviously, you know, I have to be creative all day, every day, and sometimes it's really tough to kind of come up with a new idea. But in my downtime, my hobby is studying languages, which, I don't know, people think I'm a bit weird, but I've been studying Japanese for 2.5 years, which I've kind of stopped now because I moved on to Korean, so... yeah, but I mean, I just love it. I like the idea that, you know, language is really structured, and my mind just works that way. I don't know why, but I just love it. You kind of got to like follow the rules, you know. So it's just something that it's a real passion of mine. And Korean is really fascinating. I'm loving it. Same kind of similar structure to Japanese, but the language is written in a completely different way. So yeah, it's really, I love that. And I mean, I find so much inspiration from, especially Asia. I love Asia so much. It's such a passion for me. And, you know, just kind of the idea of looking at the world through a whole other lens of, you know, reality. And I just remember I had a real breakthrough when I was studying Japanese with the word sensei, which we all know means teacher. But when you actually know the kanji, it means previous life. So I just had a real moment where I was like, wow, you know, just through different kind of glyphs that they use, they kind of see the world in a completely different way, which I thought was such a nice observation. And this is my last slide. This is probably one of the most beautiful things I ever saw in my life, and I always show it whenever I give a speech. It's a menu in a restaurant in Kyoto that I came across in the back streets of Gion, and it's basically a block of wood that's just kind of been shaved. And so it's like, it was about yay big. I should have pinched it, but you don't really steal stuff in Japan. That's not cool. But you know, and then the proprietor has written the daily menu on top, and I just love it. You know, it's just reduced down to, you know, that whole less is more thing which I was talking about before, which is, you know, functionality is, you know, it's so subjective, and it just really inspires me, that object. So there it is. I think that's it. I think that's all I've got to say. What time is it? I did all right.